Thank you for staying with us. This is TMI this Thursday. Just like said at the top of the show this morning, we're looking at 2021, not just in retrospect, but essentially the highlights of events from this year and how they have impacted us as a people and as a government, whether positively or negatively. I guess the list is endless, but let's begin from somewhere. My guest this morning to help us beat this conversation into perspective and help us establish context. It's Frank Cayosu. He's an author and a political analyst. Thank you, Frank, for coming on the program.
Quite a pleasure.
Great. So I want us to start from one of the issues that we've seen in this country this year. Some persons will say one of the key events in Nigeria is the fact that the president has withheld assent to the Electoral Amendment Act Bill 2021. But then there are several other issues, several other events that have shaped or reshaped our polity as we know it, right?
Yeah, quite a number. It's been quite an eventful year. Maybe not as eventful as 2020. But it depends on the standpoint from which you view it.
Okay.
Because 2020 was peculiar because of the new thing that happened across the globe, the coronavirus stuff and all whatnot, and its impact that was not anticipated. But 2022 has been very, very eventful. The Electoral Act, of course, is central to it. I think the Petroleum Industry Act is equally quite a factor. The pace of insecurity, a number of things. But if you look at the Electoral Act as a reference point, for me, I find it a bit unfortunate that at this point in time in our history, we are still crying over issues that should have been long put aside. Because for us to hit the mark of development, to make impact in the life of our nation, in quote, there are some basics that should be in place. And they say if the politics is wrong, every other thing will follow suit. Because politics is the peak of the triangle in terms of the interface of humans. It coordinates every other sphere of life. It is from the political standpoint that policies are made. If you drive on the road, if traffic lights will function, it's dependent on the politics of the system. Because those who steer the ship of state are the ones that will take decisions on whether this will work or that will not work. So the Electoral Act or the electioneering process is central to how politics functions.
Right.
So if a sector as vital as that is being tossed to and fro for how many years now? We're about 22 years in the Fourth Republic. Some basics that should have been part of what we had from the outset are still being argued back and forth. And President Buhari, for me, is equally to blame to a large extent. To blame because he is one of the folks in this country who has been quite a victim. He affirmed it over and over again when he contested in 2003, in 2007, in 2011, because he was defeated, in quote. He lost even if he felt he was cheated. But he was so alarmed as at that time that justice wasn't given the pride of place. So having had the leverage of emerging as the president, most people thought that from his personal experience, he would prioritize ensuring a free and fair electoral system in this country. And in my opinion, that is more important than any other legacy we would possibly leave behind, because that is what will guarantee the sustainability of all other factors that could make the nation survive. If the politics is wrong, everything will go wrong. So that's why I said the Electoral Act that he didn't sign into law or declined to sign, giving an excuse concerning the direct primaries.
The capital-intensive nature of it, and then how that it seems to be able to favor the big and wealthy parties. How much do you see those arguments from the president's end?
No, those arguments they are lopsided. I actually see those arguments, the bulk of them, as jumping the gun. Because the issue of direct primaries is a horse of different color. If you want to come to talk about political parties and their involvement, that is an issue to be addressed separately. Now, direct primaries giving advantage to big political parties doesn't make sense. Whether it's direct or indirect, all parties have their reach. So if you do it directly or indirectly, it doesn't improve or reduce the reach of a political party. That's why I said that does not count in the first place. That is the truth. Okay, you talked about cost, for example. What has cost got to do with it? The parties that are going to conduct their primaries, they are the ones that would ordinarily bear the burden, in quotes, if there were anything called cost. There's cost to every process the world over, no doubt. But the one on direct primaries is inflated beyond proportion. INEC, that they are even speaking on behalf of the presidency, was trying to make viewpoints for that. Wow, it may be quite a burden for them. They have said that however it goes, they can manage it. Because the direct primaries will not take place in units per se. Parties across the country, their level of operation is basically at the world level, even if by symbolism units are reference points because that's where we vote. But the operational management level starts from the world level. How many wards do we have in states in the country? In Edo State, we have 192 wards. If a party wants to do direct primaries, in a local government where you have the highest number of votes in a local government in this state is 13. We have some local governments that even have less than 10, but most range between 10 and 11 or thereabout. So it's not much of an ado. The president is, in my opinion, jumping the gun. That is fundamental. He should think of enriching the process. If our political culture were what it ought to be, direct primaries would not have been an option.
There are those now calling for an override of the president by the National Assembly. What's your take?
I wish it would happen, and I pray it happens. Because if it happens, it would help our political psyche, and it would promote some semblance of equality between the arms of government, because we have not had the leverage of enjoying that status, which is ordinarily integral to the practice of democracy, especially by the system we uphold. Baron de Montesquieu, when he propounded this doctrine of separation of powers, it was intended on the fact that no arm of government should be so barbarian. That's why it is emphatic to the extent that all arms of government share equality, even if their functions vary. And so if the National Assembly could muster the courage, and it's basic, to override the presidency on this matter, it's not a quarrel, it's just a legal process, it's a normal routine, it's nothing. And it will give the masses some confidence that, yes, democracy seems to be taking the right direction in this country. Because from the outset, especially in this Fourth Republic till date, the impression is that we have like a single arm of government, that the other arms are mere appendages to the executive arm, especially the legislature, because the judiciary, to a large extent, is distinct. So the National Assembly, they should override the president. You know, these direct primaries, in reality, it wasn't quite the clamor of Nigerians. But Nigerians support it because they say when change seems impossible, sometimes you need a bang to enforce it or to give it flesh. Because when you go by conventional methods of doing things in bits and bits and it doesn't seem to hit the nail on the head, a ban will be required. That is why the people on the Nigerian road support these direct primaries. If elections were conducted on a normal day in a free and fair way, it would have been a priority. But direct primaries benefits primarily the members of the National Assembly. See our trajectory from the 1999 elections till date. How people who ought to have some wealth of experience to come back and continue in legislation, because it's very vital in such in that arm of government. In a democracy, ordinarily, the most important arm is the legislature, because that is the arm that reflects representation of the diversity as it pertains to how the nation is structured. So if they are always shortchanged, they have good intent, they want to contest to come back, most of the time because of the nature of political practice in the country, governors as in determine those who emerge. That is the reason why they even brought about that direct primaries. So for me, it will be a show of shame that what is meant to benefit them primarily, they had boasted and gone about the fact that they are going to have their way in the process because they are the lawmakers. The president did not sign it, and they will not have the wherewithal to override his veto. It will be very, very unfortunate.
I want us to look at something else, the issue of COVID-19. I mean, yes, that actually hits home sometime around March of 2020. But again, we've seen the spiraling effect of it over time, even up till this year. We've seen how that the virus has mutated. Now we're talking about the Omicron virus, and Nigeria is also having its fair share, or maybe a little more than its fair share, of the impact of this virus. Some people say we have managed the situation very well. What's your take?
I wouldn't view it from the standpoint of the fact that we have managed the situation very well. I think that Africa as a continent, from the outset of the outbreak, projections or expectations were that Africa would be the continent that would be most hit because of the deficit in terms of health infrastructure.
Some people saying that at the point, some people said by July last year, Africa would have been picking corpses on the street, especially in Nigeria.
That was the expectation, because in terms of infrastructure, especially health-wise and other space, we lag behind terribly. So when there's such mishap, it is expected that those that suffer shortfalls in terms of their health infrastructure and all whatnot are the ones that will be the main victims. So I don't think management is a factor. Why I will not swim in the pool of some, I wouldn't say superstition or regional or geographical factors, but I think that played a role. Maybe our temperature, maybe because of where we have been over time as a continent, suffered from so much on that development. And all the microbes, all the parasites, and all the viruses have been attacking. We have been like harboring them for so long a time. So I think, personal opinion, no doubt, our immune system seems to have been built up to counter such much more than the other folks. If you see folks that come from the US or some parts of the world, when they come here, they bring different lotions used on their skin against mosquito bite, different stuff. See malaria that we see in Africa as a normal thing. If you go with malaria to a place like the US, it's like, let me use a native term, it's like Osu in quote, some forbidden stuff. But over here, we've been living with it for so long a time. So I think the management is not being so rosy. That is the truth. It's not that it's not so rosy. It's very dismal. Apart from the ceremonial adverts on there, it's very easy to make an announcement. You come out and say, this is that, that is it. But in terms of tracking to see the real effect of what is being done, we're very, very far. So I think that it's just nature that has been maybe a bit fair to us. Nature and the fact that we have been there for so long a time, I think that those factors have played quite a role. That's the truth. See enforcement in 2020. When government placed a ban on movement in this country for, I think, about 4 or 5 months or thereabout, before the third quarter of last year, it was when they put the ban, that was when people travel with much more ease. It's just that the journey you embark upon with, say, about 5,000 naira, you now keep between 10 and 12,000 because there's settlement on the road.
I can imagine. So we're going to take a break quickly. I want to talk to you about a few more things, but let's take a break, everyone. When we return, we'll be joined by another gentleman just to help us expand the panel here and then make the conversation a bit more robust. Stay with us. I'm joined by Barrister Matthias Sobayewan, a legal practitioner. Thank you, Matthias, for coming on the program.
Thank you, Yi.
I'm going to get back to you in a minute. So I was going to ask you something quickly, Frank. The issue around the NSAS reports that came in not too long ago. Some persons would have thought the submission of that report would become, if you like, a symbolic closure to the NSAS conversation, especially as it has to do with the Lekki Tollgate narrative. Has that been the case?
Not quite. Unfortunately, the report as was leaked before the real stuff came out, which didn't quite differ from what was leaked, was lacking coherence on some note. I think they did a very great job. Of course, it's a world of imperfection, but you do your best to dot your I's and cross your T's. But I think in the report of the judicial panel, I don't know, they had about 13 months or thereabouts to do the work. I don't know the timeline they had to do the report and review the report. I just felt that they possibly did not peruse the report quite before it was submitted. You know, sometimes the chairperson may not have people who have the mandate to peruse, read through and correct to ensure that the purport that they are inclined to is what the report reflects. That wasn't the case. But it's not like it wasn't the case generally. You know, they say one bad egg could be the factor that discontinues an entire basket of such. So the state government took undue advantage of a few of those things. That's just what happened. They had 2 reports submitted. They had a report that pertained to the Nigerian police. That wasn't made public. Neither was it leaked. The one that had to do with the NSAS proper, the Lekki Toll Gate affair, was the one that was leaked. And the use of the word massacre was what I found a bit...
Was that an overreach?
It was... It's not an overreach that is the issue. You know, when you put in forth a report, there must be coherence in the viewpoint. Okay. And it's a judicial report, so any statement that you affirm, there must be evidence to corroborate the viewpoint. So when the word massacre is used, you don't need to be a student of English language. Peruse the dictionary, you see that it's a case of people being killed, not just in 10s or 20s, but in quite some volume. So where they use that term, and yet affirm that about 9 persons were killed, it seemed a bit conflicting. It's not that there wasn't a massacre, but in giving a report, the report must reflect the evidence that is available to portray it as the event went on. The another issue that the Lagos state government equally took undue advantage of was the fact that, yes, at a point in the report, they affirmed that about 9 persons died. And at another point, they gave extreme veracity as into the claim of the pathologist, saying that his viewpoints were not contradicted. So they overwhelmingly accepted his assertion, where he affirmed that of all the bodies that were brought for autopsy, that 3 were those from the Lekki zone, in quote. And of the 3, only 1 died of gunshot wound. So those were the core areas that's a bit of disconnect took place. As I said, some I's were not properly dotted and T's not crossed. The panel may not have the opportunity to come and explain to the public anymore.
Yeah.
So the state government is the one I put the blame on. I think they just took undue advantage of that to water down the wonderful works done by that panel. Because if they didn't have confidence in the panel doled out hundreds of millions of naira. That wasn't quite called to question. Apart from a few where some people on their own part said, okay, some persons were compensated, why they were supposed to be mere witnesses. But that's also a different color. I'm sure that if by litigation or some other factors of discourse, the bulk of what is underneath the rock will be brought to limelight. But generally, I think the issues were not, they were resolved to a large extent in terms of the panel's reports being in concurrence with the viewpoint of the public, international media, and those who covered what happened at that Lekki toll gate. But for those few eyes that were not dotted concerning concurrence between massacre and the number of people they affirmed passed on, and the acceptance of the pathologist's views against what they equally affirmed in their own reports about the number of people that passed. I think those were just a few areas.
Matthias, I want to talk about what would seem an enactment or a reenactment of the Lekki toll gate issue, or the NSAS generally, that happened this year, October, when we were told there was going to be a 1-year commemoration of that NSAS movement, as we now know it. I don't know how much that accomplished for those who were driving the narrative or the conversation, but I want us to talk about the issues that led to the Lekki tollgate issue. I mean, all of the NSAS issues in the first instance. One was the issue of police brutality, especially the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, the SAS, for example. Others were issues around bringing reforms to the police system, because you've got to fix that. Until you do that, you can't talk about how the police interact with members of the public and so on and so forth. Have we moved to a better place for where we were in 2020?
Well, we have not moved. A point in reference is what happened in Imo recently, where an arrest, was to be made of a politician in the church premises.
The Uche Wonsu case.
Exactly. And then we thought that we were kidnappers or unknown gunmen, as they call them, bandits. People came shooting AK-47 rifle. You can see the iron bullets all over the place, trying to arrest politicians in the church premises in such a manner. So that speaks of the psyche of the police force. If you want to effect an arrest in such a civilian environment of a politician who perhaps it's not a deadly, it's not armed. It's not so that you resist your arrest, and you come with such force.
And just by the way, sir, some news report says he was actually attending the outing service for his late mother.
Yes. So now, if you did that, and the other persons could have been injured in the stampede, because points were made just now by the NSAS report, oh, somebody died of, only one person died of gunshot. What about those that died of stampede, when you were rushing? Because the causal effect, you came in there when they were having a peaceful protest, and you shot. You initially denied shooting. Eventually you admitted shooting. Oh, the bullet killed somebody. So from not shooting at all, from not even being there at all, to admitting shooting, and then to not admitting killing somebody. Because the denial of the Minister of Information said that no shooting, no killing, no presence of the army in the place. So you can see that it's a government of deniers. Rather than telling people the truth, you do something, you try to cover up, and then you try to deny whatever has happened, that it didn't happen at all. That is against social justice. Because I made the point over that there will be no peace without social justice. That peace is not the mere absence of tension, but the presence of social justice. That is what is lacking. Whatever happened in the report that they are, people try to sweep it under the carpet for whatever reason best known to them, there are some discrepancies here and there. Of course, even in the normal court proceedings, there will be some discrepancies. But would there be seen to be a major contradictions to the fact that exists, whether or not there was presence of the military, whether or not the policemen also, a mobile policeman also came there, whether or not they shot, and whether or not somebody died at all? That is the point I would establish. To the gloss over all of that and pretend as if nothing happened. It is the same psyche. The reason why people protested that you cannot be doing this, you cannot shoot at unarmed civilians, those who are just merely protesting. The right to protest is a fundamental human right. It's enshrined in our constitution. And so when you are protesting, what the police ought to do is to send people around to be with them and protect them and ensure that people don't hijack it and does not go out of hand. You are not to attack them, but to protect them. So they look at the psyche, they look at civilians as if you are combatant, as if you are in a war zone, in a war situation, they begin to attack. The same psyche that made these people protest to say we cannot, it's enough of this police brutality. It's the same mentality they took to arrest Uchiwonsu recently. So they have not changed. It's becoming even worse by the day. There has to be a reformed police system. All these officers there, everybody should be wiped away and bring a fresh recruit. Before you bring somebody into the police force, you must do your investigation on this person. Many of them, with all due respect, they are members of one society or the other. And so when you make an arrest, they look at the person arrested. If the person is my member, I may treat you nicely. If you are the rival group, I will treat you very roughly. So that's what I do there. So you have to do a profiling of each and every one before you now begin to bring people back to the force. Because now they are the same people you are keep reshuffling them. Okay, you send them, you have to rebrand them, whatever name you call them. They are still the same human beings, they have not changed. You put money, no matter how much money you put into the police system to try to create a reform, okay, better their barracks, better their package and everything, they are who they are. Until that human being, that psyche that be put into them to see Nigerians or see civilians as combatants, people in the war zone, in the war front, and treat them as such. Even when in wartime, there are rules. You don't engage with lethal weapon in a civilian setting. You don't. That is what they do. You came to Ife and arrest, you are shooting. People are running up and down. The news was that a bandit came to kidnap somebody. Later, PRO said, no, they're not bandits. We just came to Ife and arrest. Is that to Ife and arrest? Under the criminal procedure code, is there no provision for effecting arrest? Show your arrest warrant. If the person does not resist, you don't even want to touch the person. You are under arrest, it's sufficient. If he resists, you will minimum force to take him away. After showing your arrest warrant, here did he show anything? You came in the commando style, shooting. So have they changed? So that's the question that we all have to answer. To my own view, they have not changed.
Let's take a cue from some of the remarks that we heard at that time, Matthias. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, talked about how that there were 5 key issues that had been raised by the NSAS protesters. Yes. I'm not talking about those who hijacked the whole process. I'm talking about those who actually were driving the narrative around police reform, and how that there was an urgent need to, as it were, rejig the interaction, or if you like, the interface between the police and members of the public. Issues like we will have to reform the police, we'll have to take a second look at just review their welfare and so on and so forth. In fact, on top of all that, the Speaker of the House of Representatives had talked about how that he won't sign off on any package in terms of maybe the budgetary proposal that did not include welfare package for the police, something robust for the police. But just like you said a while ago, we are where we are. I mean, nothing really has changed, essentially. But I'm just curious, is it not supposed to be, I mean, all of those comments made by the Vice President, Speaker of the House of Reps, is it not supposed to be basis for us to be hopeful, for us to have even seen some appreciable amount of change at this point?
Well, it ought to be. It's unfortunate in this country, all we engage ourselves in is just speaking grammar. We don't walk the talk. We talk a lot. Oh, if somebody will say this, somebody, other person will say that, we debate the issues. You don't walk the talk. So Mr. Vice President has said his own. Whoever has heard it, just for the moment, after that while, it shoved away and then continue as if nothing has changed. Now, look at the members of the National Assembly. I know we are going to come to that in a while, who are taking the pulse of the public to create an electoral amendment to see that, there should be a reform in the electoral system.
Yeah.
There should be transparency. And this was the second time they are doing that. They sent to the president for his assent. He refused. Do they have the courage now to now veto that refusal?
By way of overriding the president?
Yeah, overriding it. Do they have it? So we just keep talking. We have done our part. We have sent it to him. He didn't sign for the second time. So we should stop talking too much and walk the talk. If I should expect them to sit back and look at that bill, and then we have to do majority of the both houses pass it, because that is the best for our nation today. But they would not. Look at the other panel report that was put up, by President Jonathan to ensure that it also be restructuring and all of that, that was suggested in the CONFAB report. After so much money that was spent, did they implement the report? No. All the money went that they drained. So we keep talking. We just keep talking. So Mr. President has said his own. Would they implement it? No. So unless people begin to, have a change of mind and attitude to see how we can better our country and just stop paying lip services. That's what they do. We pay lip services to these issues, nothing is happening. You talk from today till next tomorrow, we are where we are. So there must be a change, must be a positive change, a step that should be taken. Somebody who has the political will to effect these changes. And not just for us to talk and leave it there.
Like you said, we should walk the talk.
Yes.
Right. So Frank, let me turn to you quickly. The 2022 budget has been passed. Of course, we understand it has been transmitted to the president for assent. Today, we know on good authority that by tomorrow, Friday, the president will formally sign off on that piece of legislature. However, one very key component of it is the fact that Nigeria will have to do substantial amount of borrowing. And that has given many Nigerians some level of sleepless nights, in a manner of speaking. When you look at that whole budget, when you look at the several key components in it, the borrowing, the funding of it, the issues of revenue, and then you look at the deficit and so on and so forth, and then you look at where we are today in terms of the price of crude oil at the international market. We understand the benchmark now for the 2022 budget has been reviewed upward from $57 per barrel to $62. These are all elements that have implications for us as an economy. What have been your sentiments in that light?
I don't have much hope. I said that because, like Patrick Henry affirmed in his days, that you cannot predict the future by the past. So you can tell how the future would look like when you look at the pattern of the past. 2020, how was it? 2019, how was it? They call it the highest budget, almost 17 trillion or thereabouts.
Yes, thereabouts, yes.
Let's evaluate it from the so-called universal currency, the dollar, and you see what they are beating their chest over in excitement. What does it amount to? It's quite unfortunate and it's shameful. Now, what they are calling so high, what is the deficit component? About a third of it. In fact, not even about a third, more than a third of it is from the deficit component, where loans will have to be taken to address it. In this year, when the Minister of Finance gave a report, their medium-term expenditure framework report in May, that was about the second quarter of the year. In her own report, she affirmed that as at that time, between January and May, Nigerian debt service to revenue was 97%. What it meant was that between January and May 2021, for every 100 naira Nigeria made, we used 97 naira to pay debt. Which nation, which business, which individual can thrive on that note? In the second quarter and the third quarter, there was some bit of improvement, but not so good. It still ranges to up to about 80% or thereabout. The AFD, African Development Bank chairperson Kiumi, spoke in their ministerial retreat about a month ago, where he said that it is alarming that presently our debt to revenue is about 73% in 2023. How do you make progress on that note? Because if all that you are making is used to pay debt, what would you use to feed? What would you use to impact on the populace? What do you use to build infrastructure? Because debt does nothing. Already, the debt even being collected, the fact that the money in quotes, or the money being borrowed in quotes, the debt being paid back, the money is used for what it is meant for, is a subject of scrutiny on a different note. We know the Nigerian factor. From time immemorial, from when debt began to pile up, especially in the Second Republic, onward until on and on until where we are today, there's always been that Nigerian factor. The bulk of the debt Obasanjo paid for Nigeria. Economic statisticians and financial experts have affirmed that almost 50% of that money was due to interest and penalties. That's about $18 billion, how many dollars that they negotiated at that time. Now, you see the component of indiscipline. Now, I say that to say that the bulk of our expenditure in Nigeria, because of the deficit of trust and standard in our institutions, some folks have affirmed that for every 100 naira expended in this country by government, 40% is lost to institutional leakages. Now, what it means is, even when you are collecting so much money and investing, the bulk of it now seems like you are putting water in the basket. See, Ghana borrowed money, no doubt. Ghana's growth rate this year is about twice, if not more than twice that of Nigeria. Our growth rate presently is equal. The Statistical Federation said it's about 4%. When government was having interface with the IMF concerning their own projection of about 2.7%, government said that it would be about 3.5%. But we borrowed much more than them. So there's nothing to be excited about. I'm telling you, if somebody is making 100 million naira as income, and you use about 80 million to clear debt, who will you use to do things that will bring about progress? So government in this country, unfortunately, has been replete with contemporary incompetence. On a serious note, because the cap of critical thinking seems to be regulated to the refuse can of history. Government takes the easy way out. I listened to when the Senate President was saying that the only thing they can do is to borrow money. You have men who are schooled in different areas of learning, ordinarily who should maximize their potentials. But because nobody is held to account in Nigeria, the culture of critical thinking is not considered. It's just immediate. Let's just do what we can, because there's no consequence. Government is looking at the short term and not the long term. Look at the report the minister read on that day, the medium-term expenditure framework. By their projection, about 47% of what is projected as income, as in debt, the debt revenue projection between 2021 and 2024, they are making very elaborate projections. Now, I said you cannot tell the future by referring to the past. What was revenue projection in 2020? What was it in 2019? What was attained? In 2020, do you know that while revenue was about 3.34 trillion naira, debt servicing was about 3.24 trillion. 2020, the money we made, we used about 98 or so % of it to pay debt. Right now, we are in the last quarter of the year. The data is not out yet. But by what had come out by the third quarter, the second quarter, and the first quarter, our revenue shortfall is very, very high. What it means is that when you project that you are going to expect to make, say, about 7 trillion, you are not even making up to 4 trillion. That is a deficit of almost 45%. How do you meet up? And yet you are paying so much for debt. When even a secondary school leaver, a primary school student that thinks a bit, will say, look, is it not better to harness your potential, to look within, to involve the private sector, do partnership. Right now, going to borrow money. Go and check out the countries that resort to borrowing. Apart from those who have the requisite institutional framework to checkmate it, most of them end up as in on the losing end. Yeah. Apart from the big folks, of course, who have the capacity to manage their resources. But in Nigeria, there's no accountability. Things are done anyhow. That's why I said, I don't have so much for the 2022 budget. It is shameful.
I can see where you're coming from. But as we begin to wrap up now, gentlemen, because we're time constrained, I want to talk to you on the final note, Matthias. Election was held in Anambra State this year. That's produced the president of the former CBN governor, Professor Charles Soludo, as the next governor of that state. And then a lot of persons have said that election was not just a litmus test for INEC on many levels, but it was also going to be more like an eye-opener of what Nigerians should expect in the 2023 general election. What are your thoughts along those lines?
Well, for me, the consciousness of our people has been awakened. We have seen the change mantra that brought in the present government at the national level.
Okay.
We are saying that we have all been disappointed and we didn't really have the positive change that we expected. And so the power to make that genuine change inheres in the population of the youth, which is more than that of the aged in this country. So if the way we all come out to vote in Big Brother Nigeria, let already the youth come together and say, look, this is the person that we want to lead us. Just like they spoke decisively in Anambra to say this is the person they want. So no matter all the machination, all the, abracadabra that will be put up by whichever agencies of government, when they are seeing that people have spoken, in undisputed, undisputable voice, they should allow that to hold sway. For Anambra, what happened there, a lot of resources that was pushed into that election to ensure that there was peace, to ensure that there was transparency and all of that. That is just so much, voted to a particular state. In the 2023 election, would they have such resources to go around? That's my fear. They wouldn't have. That is the more reason why Mr. President won't refuse to sign. It's shameful for me, for him to have refused the second time. The first time I said it was too short for him to consider. This time around, he had no reason to give. Gave only one reason: you cannot allow, you cannot dictate to political parties how to conduct their primaries. You left the issue of the electoral transmission of results and something that was contained in the electoral act. For that reason, you just okay, fine. Remove this one and send it back to me to give my assent. So I expect the National Assembly to do the needful, because if without that being done, the kind of resources they push into Anambra, they would not have enough to put across the state. But every organ or every political party, whoever interested party, stakeholder can monitor elections in their various regions. If you do elections, you can monitor and ensure that the result that was counted right before me, that you will transmit electronically. And the whole world is watching, we can follow. And the thing is dropping, you can see what happened in Edo.
Yeah.
How, is it the report room that was set up by...
the situation room.
Situation room, that was set up by Governor Baseki. How they followed up. So every organ, every political party stakeholder will set up such a situation room and follow up the process, so nobody can rig anyone out. That will bring transparency. That is the only way. Otherwise, the beautiful situation we had in Edo and Anambra, we may not have it in 2023 because the resources that was voted to this singular state for this singular election, they will not have it available
to spread across the country. Gentlemen, I'm afraid that's the much time we're allowed to take on this discussion. I know you came loaded. Frank Cayosu in particular, I was itching to talk some more. But again, so many interviews scheduled for the show this morning. Thank you for coming to share with us.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. This is where we're leaving this conversation, everyone. We'll return shortly with a handful of interviews. Do stay with us.